Welcome to the AGvisorPOD.
Hi everyone, this is Rob Saik, CEO of AGvisorPro, and you're listening to the AGvisorPOD. This webinar we're hosting today is dealing with connecting agriculture to the consumers. I don't know of a more important topic. We've got three great guests here to take you through a wide range of discussion and opinions about what we should, could, and can and shouldn't do when we're talking to consumers. So let's get at it. Welcome to the AGvisorPOD, connecting agriculture to its consumers. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the AGvisorPOD, a webinar series looking at the connection of agriculture, technology, and farming with consumers. Today, we're really doing that. We're looking at connecting to the consumer. How do we connect agriculture to the consumer better? My name is Robert Saik. I'm the founder of AGvisorPro. I'm your host and moderator for today's webinar. We have three great guests encompassing a large swath of the industry. I'm really delighted. My friend, Dr. Sylvain Charlebois. Sylvain is from Dalhousie University, and he is well known in the sector as the food professor. You can follow him on social media. He is ranked as one of the top scholars in the area of connecting and having conversation with consumers, and he's been quoted in The Economist magazine, the Boston Globe and Mail, the Wall Street Journal, National Post, and I'm pretty sure the Vegreville Advertiser has had him on as well. Really good. Then we go to Tracy Bush. Tracy lives in the same town I do, Sylvain Lake, Alberta, but she really does all of her work out of the plant with MGM Seed and Grain out of Saskatoon. She's got 25 years in the experience. She's her key role is really connecting with growers and relationship management between growers and the people that buy the processed oats and gluten-free oats from her MGM facility, seed and grain facility. And then we have Terry Aberhart. Terry and I go back a long, long way. Terry is an agronomist. He's a farmer, 19,000 acres, just finished up the seeding operation. Terry is involved in several ventures, technology, Sure Growth Technologies, which is a precision ag consulting firm. Also, Aberhart Ag Solutions, which is taking food waste and upcycling. We'll talk about that. Upcycling the food waste with elemental sulfur, and they sell a product called BioSol. And Terry is involved also as a consultant with Precision AI, which is a company that's using drones to drop the amount of pesticide that's used to grow crops by identifying exactly where the pests are and just using technology to hammer them there. And he's also involved in a venture called Pristine Ingredients. And that's why I've invited Terry onto the show today to talk about a farmer's perspective on Pristine Ingredients. We're going to start off by asking Tracy for her thoughts on, this connecting agriculture to consumer. And Tracy, you're caught in the middle of this. You're working with farmers, buying their product, and then you're selling it to granola manufacturers, literally granola people. And so you see this squeeze going on. And one of the reasons we're doing the show today is because of you. So talk to me a little bit about this squeeze play and what you're seeing out there.
Okay, well, every year we attend a show and actually exhibit in a show called Natural Products Expo West, and that's the big one. And that's in Anaheim every year. And we always look at the trends coming back from that show. And the biggest trend right now is, and the pressure is sustainability and regenerative agriculture. These are all the things that we're hearing at these shows. And we really want you to have a plan and everything else. I think the thing that frustrates me the most is when you see the word commodity. Calling, the grain a commodity, because now it's become a specialty ingredient. And if we want farmers to do all these things, we must contract this a year in advance so they can plan. And so, we're not a commodity anymore. And I just saw an article, actually came out today, Wall Street Journal, and it says, Costco says its merchants have been contacting vendors to ask when prices will drop as soon as they observe producers' commodity prices or commodity costs declining. So, those are the kinds of things if we're going to put the pressure on the growers to do all these things, it comes at a price. And that's where, I see there needs to be a communication.
Yeah, you're basically saying that the farmers that are contracting with you to provide the oats that's according to the specifications that your buyers want are no longer growing commodity oats.
No, it's, we have, I made some notes, you want it gluten-free, you want it glyphosate-free, you want it in some cases, organic. We sell both. Non-project or non-GMO project verified. ROC is another one. Upcycled, ready to eat. So with a validated 5-log kill step, BRC certified, and the list goes on. These are not commodities anymore. Absolutely
not. I mean, you take the non-GMO project verified butterfly label. It's on $42.7 billion worth of food, and a lot of it is meaningless because, again, there is no such thing as genetically modified oats. But yet, when you look at the statistics from the consumer, 75% of Americans are concerned about the environmental impact on the products they buy. 78% want to deal with environmentally friendly companies. 73% want companies to use less plastics. 86% want companies to have more sustainable solutions. So, Sylvain, going over to you now, you see this thing really as it goes up into the consumer discussion world. How does this square with what you're seeing, these stats and what Tracy was saying?
Well, I mean, I think what's important to underscore here is that the more you recognize how fragmented food demand is, the more likely you'll see opportunities to innovate. So I've always been in the camp that an heterogeneous market is a good thing. You want consumers to want different things, or else if we all eat the same thing, it's hard to create wealth in the agri-food sector. So differences are a good thing. Now, what's complicated is our path to get there. And Tracy's agenda is exactly a good example of how difficult it is to get there. And I think it is the future, but the challenge that we're all facing right now is that consumers are moving forward, are asking for things that are very challenging. But the biggest difficulty that we all face in the agri-food sector is that most of the things that consumers are asking for, they don't want to pay for it. They don't want to pay for it. And we're seeing it at the lab with inflation. Right now, Canadians are under a lot of pressure. What's going on at the grocery store? People are spending the same amount of money this year compared to last year, despite inflation. So right now, whether or not you like organics, whether or not you like local, doesn't matter. You're trading down or sideways. That's the economic reality that the entire agri-food sector is looking at when thinking about innovation. I think that's really the biggest challenge. So Tracy, when she goes to a trade show and she hears all these things that consumers want, she has to figure out how to do it with the same amount of money or sometimes less money. That's really the trick.
Well, when you think about that, this moves very nicely into Terry's world, because Terry's a farmer, and people always think that farmers wake up in the morning, can hardly wait to spend money on fertilizer and chemical. So I've never met a farmer yet who wants to spend more money on fertilizer and chemical, yet they have to grow a crop. Now, there's a bit of an alignment here. I mean, consumers want crops that have a smaller environmental footprint. And Terry, as a farmer, you want that too, but you also want the maximum amount of profit per acre coming off your field. But you're starting to leverage technology to really do a little bit of both. And this may spin very nicely back into Tracy's world and then ultimately in messaging to the consumer. So Terry, tell us a little bit about what you're doing on the farm with technology and a little bit about your idea around pristine ingredients.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Really agree and align with Tracy and Sylvain's comments around the consumer demands and the markets and those kind of things. And so, to start off as a farmer, I think there's no other industry or area where we worry more about the next generation, worry more about the health of the land and improving it, right? And sometimes I get a little worked up when there's some of that sentiment. There's a lot of false information out there. I agree, all these different streams are great, and the more the better. If that's what people want, we do need to be conscious of what the consumer wants. And I've always felt that in conventional agriculture, in a sense, we are using a lot of technology and innovation and things to be sustainable and more efficient. None of us want to spend any more money on chemical or fertilizer than we need to. It's a cost that affects our margins. And so one of the things that we've been working on with our pristine ingredients label is we know that green on green Sense and Spray is coming to the market. There's various.
Slow down a little bit. What does green on green Sense and Spray mean?
Yeah, so green on green Sense and Spray is new technology where we can go across the field with drones or cameras and utilize AI to identify the difference between a weed and a crop. So they're both green and growing, right? And so that's what's called green on green. So we can now have the technology to identify the difference between a weed and crop and target only the weeds and not the crop with our chemical or spray applications. And so we know, right, wrong, or otherwise, consumers don't want chemical on their food, right? They don't want it. They don't maybe know or understand if it's safe or not. And it's a huge trend and demand in the industry. And so now we have technology that we can greatly reduce the amount of chemical applied to a crop, reduce the MRL or residual levels to create a more pristine or cleaner grain. And so we want the farmer to be able to not only utilize this technology and have savings in the cost of the chemical application, but then also create a more pristine ingredient, not a commodity, but a pristine ingredient that the farmer will also get paid a premium for, much like organic or non-GMO or whatever it may be. But now we have the opportunity to use this label to celebrate the use and sustainability of implementing technology into agriculture. So it's something that I'm very passionate about and excited about. But yeah, we have to, whether we like it or not, as farmers, a lot of times we just want to go and do our job and let the politicians and everybody else and the universities figure it all out. But we need to be at the table. We need to be part of these discussions and part of the solution. And we need to be conscious of what the consumer wants, because whether we don't always have to agree or align, but they're the ones that are writing the checks. And this is part of the challenge. Like Sylvain said, is people want this stuff, but are they truly willing to pay for it? And we want to do it as a farmer because it's the right thing to do, and it helps us improve our margins and do things better for the sustainability of the farm. But we also need to get rewarded in some form or fashion for doing something more, if that's what it takes.
So Sylvain, so here we have a technology. I'm going to just slow this down a little bit. This is a technology where they can fly a drone across a field and actually photograph the field down to sub-centimeter level, and then put that data back into a sprayer and spray the weeds out only on that particular area, dropping the herbicide load 80-90% from conventional broadcast spraying of herbicide. This is a complex message to take to consumers, but it also is a very sustainable type of technology doing what Terry wants to do. And it makes a hell of a lot more sense than putting a non-GMO project label on a a shaker full of Himalayan rock salt. I mean, this is a pristine ingredient label that would actually move us in the direction of the sustainability discussion. How do you unpackage that in your brain and thinking about how Terry and farmers would take that forward?
Well, so this is how much consumers know about farming, or frankly, the food supply chain entirely. Terry's operations remind me of one thing. So we're talking a lot about AI these days with ChatGPT, and so AI is being retailed to all of us right now, probably for the first time. I mean, a lot of people are realizing how powerful AI can be. But when you look at the entire food chain from farm to fork, the people who have bought into AI a long time ago are farmers. Everyone else is behind, really. And so processors, I work with processors, distributors, retailers, even in the food service, they're all behind. They've never wanted to compromise, traditions, the culinary arts. If it's not broken, don't break it. Technology adoption has been very slow across the supply chain, except on farms. That's the reality that we're all facing. But consumers, when they think about food, they think about the grocery store, and grocery stores, grocers, and I tell them that grocers aren't necessarily, they aren't necessarily fond of new technologies. Grocery stores have barely innovated in the last 30 years. And that's what consumers know. They have no idea what's going on at Farmgate. And so that connection is, yes, we talk about it in echo chambers, but other than that, I'm not sure the message is reaching consumers at this point.
So when you talk about farmers adopting AI, artificial intelligence, I call it augmented intelligence. Back in the day on a dairy farm, we used to call it artificial insemination. Now, AI means something different now. But when we're talking about AI, and really, I'm going to put some words in your mouth. But for example, auto steer, GPS guidance, auto steer down to sub-inch accuracy. Farmers have been doing that for a long time. I don't think consumers understand how accurately the machines are driven and how carefully we are putting product on the field.
No, absolutely. So, I spent some time in Ottawa, as you guys do, I'm sure. And, I find myself talking to some people who are really not all that knowledgeable about farming at all. And these people are policymakers. These people are influential bureaucrats in Ottawa. Especially right now, the regime that that we need to deal with right now is very urban centric. And so how do you actually connect with an urban-centric regime when consumers are looking at all sorts of things and a lot of information is thrown at them? Most of it is not believable or accurate, and so it's been. I feel for consumers these days. It's really, really confusing. But what is really dangerous right now is that Ottawa is jumping on that confusion bandwagon, and that's a dangerous place to be. And that's what we're facing. So public perceptions are skewed, but policies are also skewed right now.
Well, this, Tracy, this lends itself not only to the confusion at consumer level, but confusion in the boardroom. And so your company buys oats from farmers and sends it to other manufacturers that turn it into cookies and granola and all kinds of oat milk, etc. But you are seeing that very effect of the confusion coming from their boardrooms coming down to like your MGM seed and grain milling. So can you comment on what Sylvain just said, the confusion level at consumer, but the confusion level also at boardroom level?
Well, ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm a salesperson, and my job is to give our customers what they want. But I also feel that I need to educate them on the supply chain and what our growers are doing and so on. So I suppose I think the whole thing is bottom line is none of the urban area or urban people are not educated in agriculture. I was talking to my 16-year-old son yesterday, preparing for this talk. And I said to him, what do you learn in school about agriculture? And he says, well, we learn about, photosynthesis and that kind of thing. But other than that, that's pretty well it. And so really, I think that this is the fuel for what keeps us alive. And there just is no education. And so, and it filters up just like what Sylvain is saying. So at the end of the day, we work with our growers. We're trying to see what we can and can't do. And this is going to be a constant evolution. But again, it can't be commodity based. And that's my, that's the key. These are ingredients now. And it has to be treated that way.
If they're ingredients and farmers are actually producing ingredients, then the ingredients, there's two ways to kind of approach this. Going to Terry now, but we've had a lot of labels put on foods. And I think a lot of the labels, in my personal opinion, I think a lot of the labels there are basically designed to scare people into buying the product and not buying other products. So you've got, I've got a graph here, different approaches to farming and food. Conventional, which is the heavy use of chemical and fertilizer. Regenerative, which is chemical no-till approach, but still on the conventional side. Well, I don't know anybody who does chem fallow anymore, maybe down in Montana a little bit. But then you have organic, which is holistic approach. And then you have organic regenerative, which includes carbon capture and animal welfare and fair payments and all that kind of stuff. And all these little sections trying to brand themselves as the truth and the light and the way, when in fact, I think one of the things that's happened is regenerative. The whole discussion around regenerative really to me is around good agronomy. And so Terry, I want you to take off with this whole idea. What does regenerative mean to you? And do you think it is in fact a label or is it a way of life? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a very loaded question in a sense. And I think, just to step back really quickly, I mean, there's all these different labels, and I think those things are okay or good in some cases. But what I have a challenge with or concern with is when it becomes an anti, when the messaging and the marketing is about this is bad versus, buy this because of the good reasons, whatever it may be. Like using this, and a lot of that's the issue with conventional agriculture has been kind of lambasted and put down with these other labels and brands, which causes a lot of confusion. And then this regenerative idea, I think it is great, but I think it's also still generally just an idea or a concept. There's no absolute clear definitions. I love the concept and the ideas around it, but again, it creates more confusion, I think, a little bit in the marketplace. And what we need to do a better job as growers at all levels is to tell our story. This is something that we're typically not good at. We'd rather jump on the tractor and play in the dirt or work 18 hours a day or do whatever, rather than try to explain to the consumer what we're doing. But I think this is one of the opportunities that we have, and one of the things I'm passionate about a label like Pristine Ingredients. I see it's also potentially an opportunity to help educate the consumer about technology and efficiency. And I mean, the level that most good conventional farmers manage their crops and their fields and their nutrients, we do a better job of managing what food we feed our crops and taking care of the health of our crops better than 90% of humans do themselves, right? And that's the crazy thing. Like we tissue test our crops, we soil test, we use variable rate, we use all these different technologies to optimize the health and production of our crop. And most humans don't even do that themselves, which is crazy to think about.
Well,
So-
if you don't make money.
That's right. We have to be sustainable. And part of being sustainable is making enough money that you can operate in the future. And so that's a lot of times what gets missed, right?
One of the biggest things.
Go ahead, Trace.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about sustainability, I think the first thing that comes to mind is the environment. Environmental sustainability. That's what everybody thinks. But a big part of sustainability is money. That people are getting fair wages, that people are being treated properly. That is part of sustainability. And I have this article that just came in the Baking and Business Journal. And it says, I just highlighted this one part. We can't let our farmers shoulder the upfront financial costs of transitioning to regenerative agricultural practices on their own.
Well, that's fine. I mean, this is, and I'm going to go with Sylvain next. And this is a frustration that we're feeling between Terry and what you just said, Tracy, is that what the hell is regenerative? I mean, at the end of the day, I've been working with farmers for 40 years. Those fields, after 40 years, are producing double the crops that they were producing when we started. And the organic matter is as good or higher. The water retention is as good. Regenerative, to me, is cloak and dagger for good agronomy and the adoption of technology on farm, except somebody is waking up now and recognizing that, wait a minute, farming can actually be part of the solution to this environmental dilemma. Your take on this, kind of a wide-ranging...
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel for farmers, but at the end of the day, I think all of these initiatives are a product of risk communication failures, I think. Let's take the non-GMO project as an example. I personally think it's a fraud. Many farmers think it's a fraud.
I think it's
it is a fraud, of course.
It's designed on fear.
But I would ask the audience, why does it exist? Why do we need to deal with a non-GMO project in the first place? It is a product of a risk communication vacuum. So we decided to adopt new technologies, great biotechnologies out in the field. Farmers have actually embraced these new technologies. They've increased yields. We have a sector that is performing very well. It's more efficient. But we've never actually, back in the 90s, we never bothered to explain to consumers what was going on. I was before Monsanto was bought in 2014. I actually visited Monsanto, and I did ask, why didn't you bother explaining to consumers what was going on with your technology? And they basically said over and over again that the science was on their side. And that was a huge mistake, and we're paying for that today. And so we've had many failures. Look at the genetically modified salmon. That's another example. Why was it boycotted by all grocers in Canada? Which is why they moved to the US now, because they didn't want to sell a product to scare people. And so that's why I think we need to be a little bit more cognizant of the fact that we're dealing with a highly powerful consumer empowered by social media. A lot of things can happen without any controls whatsoever. It's a scary thought.
So to take this and spin it 180 degrees, we have these labels that are designed to generate fear in the consumer. And just look at eggs. You can buy eggs for 19 cents a piece or 71, depending on the package and the story behind the eggs. So there's not.
I would rephrase that, Robert, if I may. I wouldn't say install fear. I would call it perceived reassurance. That's what I would call it. Because it's about reassuring the public, but using false pretenses.
So what I want to go with you on is that if we could change the narrative, and again, the statistics are bearing themselves out that the consumers want to buy products from companies that are quote unquote sustainable. People want farmers to move to more regenerative, quote unquote, whatever practices those are. But in the end of the day, I think regenerative practices increase carbon in the soil, organic matter, water infiltration, reduce greenhouse gases, all those good things. That's all in the interests of everybody, farmers, etc. But let's turn the conversation, Sylvain, towards something called sustainability indexes. You've got several conversations going on in the United States. Companies like Syngenta have a sustainability index app you can download. The Canadians now have a sustainability index thrust that they're working on. Does that have a chance to make a difference, and will consumers give a shit?
I don't know. I mean, I think to Tracy's point, it's hard to convey information to a confused public. There's lots of noise out there, especially around sustainability these days, and it means something different to different people. Data is always good. So these indexes are going to be using data, and this is the one thing that companies need to do more. It is something that farmers need to do more, collect data to basically protect themselves and build a case for what they're doing. I mean, I cover all sectors of the agri-food economy. I look at the blue economy. I look at crops. I look at livestock. I look at everything.
What's the blue economy?
Ocean,
Sorry.
fish and seafood. Yeah. Okay. Yep. I'm at Dal, so I'm close to the ocean. So we care actually about fish and seaweed. But I got to tell you, all of these sectors are facing the same reality as in crops. It's the same thing. It's always, look at beef. I mean, beef is facing the same challenge. How do you actually convey to the public that you are sustainable? The Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef is a wonderful initiative, but it started 10 years too late. Because really, between, I'd say, 2006 and 2016, something really hard happened. And what happened? It's social media. All of a sudden, people were able to talk to each other in real time. And that's a powerful thing. But it's also a very, very dangerous thing for industry. Right now, you and I, Robert, I know we spend a lot of time on social media. We look at what's written there. If you're in business, if you're out to make money in the food industry, you are dirty. And people have forgotten that we have a capitalistic economy and businesses exist for a reason. Someone has to remind people of that, but it's very, very difficult to do right now because of the overpowering narrative against everything and anything right now that actually has something to do with, relating sustainability with economic sustainability. It's just nobody wants to hear about that.
You're in Banff, Canmore right now? Yeah. So it was March of one year, and I was there, and I ordered a steak in a restaurant, and it said our steak is grass-fed. I looked at the waitress and I said, I haven't seen grass since last October because it snowed early. So how old is this beef actually that you're serving me? Or where did it come from? Because I would like to know what the carbon footprint on this grass-fed beef is. So over to Terry now, the sustainability side. It seems that society, boardrooms, it seems that investors that are invested in ESG, environmental, societal, and governance, they're all concerned about this sustainability thing. Talk to me about a farmer. Sylvain just said we need to be tracking more data. That's going to be thrown on your back. Is it possible? And what are you thinking about as a farmer that you're starting to collect to substantiate your claims of sustainability or regen or whatever they are?
Yeah, well, as far as the data is concerned, I mean, most farms have the data. They maybe just aren't, tracking or organizing it in the way that we need to produce some of these indexes. And I'm kind of on the same page with Sylvain. I mean, I'm not sure if these indexes are going to move the needle or not, or what impact they're going to have. I think the root issue here is what has been described. I mean, anti-marketing is unfortunately more powerful than positive marketing, and you see that in political ads, whatever it may be, right? And so the niche the niche kind of, or these different segments, have done an incredible job of anti-marketing to drive sales and drive what their viewpoint or bias is. And we all have our own biases. That's the big challenge, and social media has really changed that. And the other huge challenge is we're 2% of the population. So, or something like that, right? So how do we compete with the other 98% that, are messaging and going back and forth all the time? And it's kind of seems like it's left to the producer. And this is just a bit of a thing that's dawned on me in this conversation, but why aren't we getting, more support from the Mosaics or from the Bayers that are, the products that we're using, or these kind of things to help tell a better story? And I think either way, we need to, whether it's indexes or labels, somehow we need to start telling our story better. We need to connect those consumers so they can understand. I mean, 40, 50 years ago, half the people probably had some connection to the farm in some way, or actually came from a farm. But that is totally so there's all these different streams that are coming together at the same time that are affecting this messaging. And if essentially in the last 30 or 40 years, we've lost that connection to the farm gate. We've lost that connection to what's really going on. And how can Tracy talked about the environmental sustainability and the profitability. Well, I don't know any farm that can be sustainable if they don't take care of the environment and the soil and the water and all those resources as well. And I can, I fully believe and have evidence to show that, our land is in better condition, nutrient and organic matter wise and production wise and efficiency wise than it was 30 years ago by doing the things that we're doing. Is there things that we still need to improve? Is there things that, we need to look at and constantly improve? Of course, absolutely. It's not a perfect system, and we're continuing to do that. But somehow, some way, we need to tell a better story, and we need to get all the parties that are involved, because it's the 2 against the 98% in a sense.
So Terry, with pristine ingredients, you're really using technology, green on green. The question and answers was how accurate. I mean, you could talk a bit about the accuracy of the spray, but it's quite accurate. And it drops the pesticide load by like 80, 90%. Quickly speak on that. I'm going to go to Tracy next and say, from the standpoint of working with farmers that you're contracting with, you're working actually with fewer farmers than ever, and they've got to do more of the things that Terry's talking about. So Terry, give us a quick update on what that accuracy is, and how are you going to prove it?
Yeah, so the accuracy is incredibly accurate. I don't know how to describe it in exact terms, but I mean, it's measuring each plant individually, each weed, like even from a tiny, like things that you wouldn't even be able to see with your own eye. And these drones can fly at like 70 kilometers an hour and pick up all that stuff. So really the limitation is how accurately we can implement that weed map. And that technology is continually evolving. And I believe not too far in the distant future that it may not even be a chemical application that's hitting that weed. It could be a laser. It could be, a little robotic hand that literally plucks the weed out. But the level of accuracy is to a per plant level. And then the other question about how are we going to prove that? Well, this is actually, I think, quite simple, because we would benchmark against the conventional practice. So the conventional practice is, in a sense, carpet bombing the whole field with spray. Like we've, our systems and technology largely over the last 50 years have evolved over human labor, farm labor limitations. So equipment is bigger and wider, and chemical spray systems were specifically designed for maximum overlap, not to miss anything. They're specifically designed to, hit a wide a swath as possible and hit everything that exists in the field, whether it's, your crop or the dirt or the weed, right? But now we have the technology that we can go about that a different way. And it's greatly going to change not only that, you look at even things like John Deere has come out where it's spraying starter fertilizer literally on every seed. What kind of efficiency improvement is that as well. And so we believe that this pristine ingredients label not only can, we're driving it towards a green on green and chemical reduction, because I think that's the biggest fish to fry. But we also believe that, hey, if you're a farmer using John Deere's fancy technology to spray starter fertilizer on every seed versus dribble it in the whole seed row, which isn't efficient, maybe that's worth something too, right? And so we feel there's this opportunity to use this to help educate the consumer on how crops are being grown and how technology is being used in a positive way. We're not going to be, this organic or no GMO is no good, or it's BS or whatever. It's a hoax. I don't care. I just want to tell this positive story of how farmers are using technology and practices to do things in a better way. And whatever other people do somewhere else, that's their baby.
Yeah, that's always an interesting thing to me. People say, well, I ask people why they buy organic, and they say, well, there's no pesticides being used. And I always ask the questions, well, how do organic farmers control insects and diseases and weeds? And then they go blank because they haven't thought about it. Of course they use pesticides. They just have to be organic pesticides, or they're cultivating the soil, which degrades the soil. Now, Tracy, you told me in a conversation a little while ago that the number of farms you're dealing with at MGM and contracting upwards into the supply chain for granola bars, that number of farmers is decreasing. One of the questions that Graham put into our chat today was around farmers taking more control over the connection between their operations and the consumer. You're, in fact, starting to do that by introducing some of these farmers to the board members of the companies buying your oats, right?
Correct. Yeah. So I'm really encouraged. Our customers are very, I've been in this business for years, but since I've been with MGM and in the last 4 years, Bay State Milling is actually an MGM. So since I've been with this company in the last 4 years, I've seen our customer base, and they're some of the biggest brands and emerging brands and the ones gaining more and more market share. We have great customers, and I'm seeing more and more how they want to get engaged with the producers. So that's super encouraging. We throughout the summer, we're constantly bringing our customers out to meet our farmers and so on. We have about 50 growers. I mean, we can't see everybody. But we certainly take them to select farms and, well, not select, but farms close by so that they can meet our growers and so on. I've also had customers connect with me and say, hey, we want to profile your growers and meet and interview your growers, and with their permission, of course, and releases and so on and so forth. I've had some of our customers actually profile the growers, and they have a QR code right on their products, and they can meet the growers on that. The one thing that's really nice about MGM is that we don't commingle. So we bin every farmer's grain separately. So when we're milling, we are milling one farmer's grain at a time, and we can pretty much trace it right to that grower. So it's actually a nice thing for our customers. And they're quite encouraged by that. And every experience I've seen, this is really good stuff. Every experience I've seen where we've brought customers to our grower base and met with them, and they talk about their farming practices, it's always been very positive. Mm-hmm. So, I think it's getting better. But again, there's a whole lot of other people, the consumers behind that too. So, I mean, there's the companies, but then there's the consumer, and the consumer, we aren't bringing the consumers to the growers.
This is one of the reasons that I founded AgVisor Pro. AgVisor Pro connects agriculture to its experts. It's connecting agriculture. People can go on AgVisor Pro, ask a question anonymously, geotag the question, know that that question is going to be addressed by verified experts, farmers, ranchers, etc. I think we need to narrow this, shrink this ability for consumers to know that they can talk to a trusted expert and really ask intelligent questions. Sylvain, as you are staring into the crystal ball here and the challenges facing agriculture and farming I think the four things farmers are being asked to do is produce and reduce and protect and restore. Those are the four things, all simultaneously, without actually being given any more money to do so. But I think at the key of this is farmers understand, or consumers understanding the kinds of thing that Terry's doing on his farm. Can you comment as to how important this kind of initiative is, or thoughts around how you think we should bridge this gap that exists?
So I would look at two worlds, the B2B world and the B2C world. So with the B2B world, I think what Tracy described is wonderful. I think it's great to accommodate connections and relationships, allowing stakeholders to understand each other. So it's about knowledge sharing, and that's great. That's wonderful. But Tracy also recognized the almighty power of public opinion. And that's a big one. And so how do you overcome that? So the B2C world is very complicated for everyone. Every sector is facing the same big gorilla, essentially. And so how do you get a hold of the gorilla? Well, Terry actually kind of mentioned something about, who else is out there advocating for farmers? Where's Mosaic and, other companies? Well, they're all for-profit organizations. So, and frankly, to a certain extent, farmers aren't necessarily, I've always believed that advocating for farmers is not necessarily a winning formula. Why? Because consumers who will engage with farmers they've already bought and they've already drank the Kool-Aid. It's the other 95% that you want to get to. And those 95% are heavily influenced by what's going on in the news, on social media. How do you connect with them? And to Terry's point, I've always argued, where are universities in all this? Like, where are educational institutions in all of this? Where are they? I'm out there, but I'm not overly popular on campus, to be honest, because I defend business, and defending businesses on campuses these days is a tough job. So that's really the one thing that I think your audience should know, is that science is great, but science is also, influenced by who actually conducts the science. And right now, again, I want to go back to Ottawa. Ottawa's policy is very much influenced by, an all-you-can-eat buffet style science. You pick what you want to support a narrative. That's what we're seeing right now. And so how do you connect with the public? Well, I'll give you one example. Last year the Canadian Meat Council was in a pickle. I mean, they were actually looking at seeing ground meat products at the grocery store to be labeled as too fatty, the front of package labeling rule. And they called me, I think it was about a year ago, a little more than a year ago, and they said, Sylvain, we're, in the Gazette, Canada is about to become the first country in the world to label ground meat. It's the most affordable animal protein out there. And I don't think that Ottawa had this narrative to this, let's face it, there's an anti-meat sort of push in Ottawa, let's face it. So the Cattlemen's Association, CMC, they were all against this overpowering narrative. So they contacted me and said, listen, Sylvain, we'll put your name on the press release, and if media has any question, they'll call you. I said, don't do that. Don't do that. I'll come up with a way to make this a public issue. And the way we made it a public issue is with money. You label ground meat. We did the research. You label ground meat All you're going to get at the grocery store is extra lean, and extra lean is more expensive. While food inflation is at 10%, you're going to penalize the most needy. That's a problem for Ottawa. We made it a problem for Ottawa. We made it a problem for consumers. And then a few weeks later, the Cattlemen's Association came in with their beautiful survey, Don't Label My Beef. And it worked because in June, the Minister of Health decided to change his mind. So that's kind of the things we need to do, collaborate and work. But thinking that farmers are the best messenger in the B2B space, yes. In the B2C space, I'm not convinced.
So we've got B2B, we've got B2C, and then we've got B2P. It's business to politicians. So you got that level.
Well, B2C and B2P is kind of the same thing, right? Yeah.
So the idea that again that I'm working on, and you said at university, I gave a speech at university. We have a channel called No Ideas Media, KNOW, No Ideas Media. A lot on genetic engineering there. Gave a speech at the University of Saskatchewan, gave a speech at McGill. My posters are defamed because I'm talking about GMO. So there's people putting horns on my head on the posters. Kind of funny. Anyway, the point is that these are all people attending the lectures are intelligent people. They're ignorant, but they're intelligent. They just don't understand the science. And I think that, again, my initiative here is to try to create a platform, AGvisor Pro, where people can ask questions anonymously and know that those questions will be asked answered by farmers and ranchers. Do you think, Sylvain, that we could shrink the channel and make it a more trusted channel? Do you think that's possible?
I don't know. I don't know. I certainly would love to hear Tracy and Terry on that one, but I'm honestly, I'm scared. Like I'm a scientist, and frankly, like I thought science was really our best tool to defend anything that was, science is not an absolute. Of course, it's a road to discovery, but at the same time, science should guide us a little bit. But science is being weaponized now. Like it's really ugly. So I'm absolutely super concerned about what's going on right now. I'm very honest with you.
Great. Go ahead, Terry.
Yeah, I was just going to maybe add a couple things. Like I think that there's lots of layers to this, of course, and I do think that we need to focus more on like education in the schools and ag in the classroom. I think they've got some great programs, but they aren't, maybe being utilized as much as they could or should or be supportive. I also think that, like Sylvain mentioned, we need to create, different ways in order to solve these problems. I think as well, anything where we can go direct to the consumer, I think is a great opportunity because you're forming that relationship and creating that story. And in a world of deglobalization and people want to buy more locally, I think there's a great opportunity in that. I also am very fearful, like Sylvain, about science and the lack of science-driven decisions. But ultimately, I still believe that in the long run, science will prevail because I just don't believe that stupidity can exist forever. Or, just doing things without science. Maybe I'm being naive there. But yeah, I think there's lots of layers to this. And the same end, these kind of issues and problems have existed for a long time, and eventually we always find a way to break through it. But it is becoming more concerning, and we just have to figure out how to bridge these gaps. And it's probably not one solution, but a lot of little things to make. I think
that when it comes down to education, a part per million or a part per billion, which is more scary? Well, this is a very basic thing. A part per million is 1 second in 27 days. A part per million, 1 second in 27 days. A part per billion is 1 second in 32 years. This is very, very basic. Just because you can measure something in parts per billion, does that make it scary? Deborah brought up a point. We are talking about education of the consumer, which is backwards. Perhaps we need to learn more about the consumer to communicate with them. again, Sylvain, is that like the consumer is so big, that consumer, we need to learn more about the consumer. My question about this is, does the consumer know what the hell they want?
It doesn't matter, but I actually do agree with the point that we need to understand, and there's no such thing as the consumer. We're talking about a market here, and the market is it's getting complicated out there. I mean, Tracy faces that reality every single day. I mean, and so that's why I think it's important to do. I certainly would encourage farmers to do their homework when it comes to markets in general. What's going on out there with consumers, and what are they concerned about? It's more about what they're concerned about and than intended choices. I know that like intended choices would be organics, fair trade, whatever. You shouldn't be looking at those things. You should be looking at what's driving these decisions. What's driving these wants? Is it about the environment? Is it about animal welfare? What are we talking about here? And is it what has market currency, like real market and social currency? Like, what do people actually care about? And I certainly would encourage farmers to, look into the data, and because we collect data every day at the lab, and there are other labs in the country doing the same thing. So I would encourage farmers to connect and try to understand consumers and what they're concerned about. And the answers you'll get today may not be the same answers you'll get next week or even tomorrow.
I think Rob Davies asked a question too.
Right?
Yeah, Rob Davies asked a question around the whole idea of traceability and what types of data the farmer should be tracking. And again, that too is a moving target. Hopefully, some of the work going on with national indexes and sustainability indexes will start to guide farmers as they start to think about data to collect to substantiate their sustainability story, carrying that message up to the politicians and ultimately reinforcing consumers. As we wrap up here, my thoughts really turn, instead of input-based, trying to reduce or to document everything that's going into producing a crop, could we not have more focus on outputs? In other words, what is the organic matter growing over time? Have we been able to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide or methane or nitrous oxide coming off the field, which is output-based measurements? As we wrap up, and your thoughts on this connecting to consumer, one of the initiatives that we're working on with the Ministry of Education in Alberta, hopefully, is to create a channel on AgVisor Pro to connect teachers and students where they can ask anonymous questions answered by verified farmers and ranchers. I think that would be good. Terry, what are some of the things in the last 3 minutes, a minute each, that you think would help to create a bridge between consumers and agriculture? Then Stacy, and then Sylvain.
Well, it's my own bias, of course, but I do believe that this label that we're working on is one of those ways to bridge that. I also think, as much as I may be skeptical about the indexes, I think if we can get that right and it's legit and measure it, that is another tool that we could use to measure, is this way more efficient than another? It's just like diesel or get fuel or electric right now. Like, maybe in future years when we have a fuller understanding of the total carbon footprint of batteries and things like that, we might learn that it's actually not what we thought it is. Maybe it is, but I don't think we have enough information yet. So that's another way. And I think we do have to understand the market and largely, I think if I was honest, I probably haven't done a very good job of really understanding the market and finding out what does my customer or the end user actually want versus complaining about it. So there's a few things there, and I think we need to figure out how to tell our stories better.
Tracy, what's your thoughts on this? What's your takeaways? What does MGM milling do?
Well, I think at the end of the day, our consumers are busy. They're very busy with their lives and so on. They don't have the time to look at all these things. So I think something in the way of a community or a platform where we could put the consumer with the growers so they could ask questions and have a free conversation and learn when they have free time. Instead of, they're not going to sit down likely and watch a program. So it would either be podcast or a social media, with AGvisor Pro or something like that, where they can connect. I think that would be excellent.
Well, that's certainly why we even take the webinar we're doing here and repurpose it as a podcast so people can listen to it on the go while they're busy. Sylvain, what are some of your thoughts in closing about the challenges and how do we bridge this gap, this connection?
Well, we often say that data is the new oil. For farmers out there, make data your best friend. In order to convince people you need data, you need passion, you need emotion, but motion and passion are worthless without data. So make data your friend.
Well, that's cool. Well, I want to thank you all for, I think, one of the most energetic webinars we've had so far. We've had some really good ones. This will be available on AGvisor Pro, and all of these experts are available on the AGvisor Pro app. Download it on iOS or Android for free. You can ask questions for free. On our freemium version, you can connect with experts, you can connect with companies, you can connect with farmers. It's a platform and an ecosystem we're building to move agriculture forward into a more sustainable, more profitable for farmers type of world. Thank you all for your time. And thanks to the audience for being with us. Until next time, Rob, over and out. Well, that was a tremendous webinar. Thanks for joining us as we talked about connecting agriculture to its consumers. The experts on the webinar are all available on AGvisor Pro. You can download an iOS or an Android for free. Join our premium service, ask your questions, connect to great people. Thanks for being with us. Until next time, Rob, over and out.